Father's throne. He loves righteousness. He hates iniquity. Therefore, thy throne, O Lord, is forever and ever. So he tells us to praise the Lord, and that's a good thing. Then he tells us why we ought to praise the Lord. Now he makes another emphatic statement. He says, let all the inhabitants of the earth stand in awe of him. Let all the earth fear the Lord. The word fear, when I'd heard preachers when I was a little kid, and I'd heard preachers talk about we ought to fear the Lord, I thought we ought to be scared of the Lord, terrified of the Lord. You know, the Bible does say, persuade some men with fear. And there are some people that cannot be persuaded any other way than they're scared of the consequences. They're scared of the pain that may ensue once they get caught doing something. I have to rely on my profession a lot to make illustrations, and I can tell you I was appreciating teachers and the job that they do. They're all behavioralists, and each teacher in a classroom is a behavioralist. They understand human behavior probably better than most people out in the world, because they deal with 30 to 40 to 100, 120 different personalities and behaviors that come out of those personalities every day. It's never the same. It's always different. And some children just don't get it. Some children on some days when a teacher's trying to go or bend over backwards to be patient with children, they simply don't understand that the teacher has an enormous amount of power to make their lives miserable. And they keep on pushing the buttons and pushing. And you know, sometimes, every once in a while, a teacher has a bad day and begins to throw their weight around. And that's when children then sometimes are persuaded by fear. But that's not a sustainable approach. You know, I've often said this about churches, that the Lord calls us sheep, and it's the reason why we're called sheep is because we can be led. And sheep are led, they're not driven. We can drive cattle and we can drive goats, but we can't drive sheep. If you begin to try to drive sheep, they won't trust you anymore, and then pretty soon they won't be led anywhere by you anymore. They have to trust their shepherd. So a shepherd's got to lead with a great deal of patience. Sometimes sheep don't go in the direction you want them to go in. Well, it's the same point, or the illustration here. We're not to fear the Lord because we're scared that he's going to catch us doing something wrong, and we're scared of the consequences. That's not the kind of fear that he's talking about. Fear in this context means a healthy respect, an awe-inspired respect. There's very few people on this planet that I have an enormous amount of respect for. That if they asked me to do something, I would just simply do it without question, no matter how outrageous the request was, because I have an enormous amount of respect for them. I trust them. There's probably about 5 people on the planet that if they called me right now and said, John, I need you to go to Alaska, and when you get there, pick up a payphone in Juneau. It's the last one surviving. This doesn't work for this illustration. There's no more payphones. But anyway, when you get to Juneau, Alaska, look in a safety deposit box. It'll be a red envelope. It'll tell you what to do next. I'll just do it. There's only about, like I said, 5 of those people. One of them sitting in this room. It's my wife. But if you guys asked me to do the same thing, I would have a lot of questions. Well, why am I going to Alaska? What's in Alaska? What's in the red envelope? How am I going to get there? Who's going to pay for it? The Lord deserves our undying, absolute, honorable respect. We have no reason, we have absolutely no reason not to trust what he tells us to do. Not to trust what he tells us not to do. We have absolutely no, he's given us no reason. Now, we may misunderstand him from time to time. We may get angry at God. We may not understand all the time why he does what he does. But what he's just told us is even if you don't understand it, you can trust him because he's good. And if you doubt that he's good and that he's full of righteousness, just look out into the earth and see how well it's put together. I always think about this. My mother told me one time. She said, you know, the Lord certainly is good. He could have made everything in black and white. Can you imagine how boring this earth would be if everything was black and white? No greens, no blues, no color, no nothing. Just everything's black and white. He could have done that, you know, son, and everything would be very boring. He said, and he could have made everybody like you, and it would be very boring. You'd get bored with yourself after a while. If there were 6 billion yous running around, it'd be a pretty terrible place, first of all, son. And second of all, it'd be a pretty boring place. You know, you can tell what kind of discussion that was. But it made an impression on me that the Lord certainly is good. And it doesn't take very long if you're looking for the goodness of the Lord in the earth to see it. And if then the Lord is good, and if then the Lord is righteous, then we ought to stand in awe of him for making everything in 6 days with the word of his breath, and with the breath of his nostrils, creating the heavens and creating everything good, and standing back from it and saying, and the Lord saw this and that and saw that it was good, and it is still good, and the earth is full of his goodness. This is a cheap one, but I'm going to take the opportunity while I've got it. You know, you don't have to look very much further than the United States of America to know that the earth is full of goodness. The United States of America was founded on a lot of good principles that come right out of the Word of God, principles that came from God himself. I reject the notion that our founding fathers were a bunch of deists and Enlightenment students. Maybe Thomas Jefferson was, but the rest of them weren't. I don't remember who it was, but one of our founding fathers, I believe it was Washington, said it's impossible to govern men without the Word of God, without the Bible. It's impossible to do it. Don't tell me he was a deist. Who was not? Whoever said that? And I could go on and on quoting the founding fathers and their dependence on the Lord. Benjamin Franklin, who's accused of being a deist when they were at a deadlock in the Constitutional Congress, said, gentlemen, I think we need to have a word of prayer, and called the delegates to a word of prayer. And after the prayer, they got past whatever it was they were fighting about. We could go on and on and on. This nation protects people's liberties. It protects people's God-given freedom. And there's been nothing like it in the earth up to this point. And I don't think there'll ever be anything quite like it if it ever leaves and if it's ever gone. We're living in the greatest country on earth as far as religious freedom and freedom of speech goes, and people's just human rights being protected. Yes, we've got a lot of bruises, and we've got a lot of bumps, and we got a lot of scabs. We're not perfect because we're made out of people, but we're the best thing going on the planet. And it doesn't take very far to get outside of the United States before you realize that. Been to other places and been to other countries, and I can tell you, we take things for granted in this country that other people don't enjoy, that they would love to have, that you and I have. So the earth is full of goodness. If you want to talk about natural beauty, okay. Philosophical beauty, we can talk about that. We want to talk about religious beauty and liberty, we can talk about those things. Who do you think put those things here for us to enjoy? It was the Lord indeed himself. Therefore, we ought to stand in awe of him, and we ought to fear him. Fear meaning respect. We ought to trust him and vaunt him, put him up on a pedestal. Now he begins to give us reasons to do that, if we didn't have enough. For he spake, and it was done. He commanded, and it stood fast. Thought about all the points in the Old Testament about where the Lord spake, and it was done. He commanded, and it stood fast. We talked about creation last Sunday, so won't get into creation this time. My mind rotated to the New Testament. I'll never get over it. There is something that we would just spend a wonderful week at the beach. There is something about a thunderstorm at close to the ocean that's more ferocious, it seems, than thunderstorms anywhere else, especially when you're out on the water. If you're out on the water in a thunderstorm, if you've ever been on the water in a thunderstorm, strange things happen. weird things happen, like lightning striking the ocean. And you can see it. Water spouts coming up out of nowhere, which are just tornadoes over the ocean made out of water. Amazing things happen out there during a thunderstorm. It's always comical to me that boats that are usually driven by people in thunderstorms, sometimes they sink. And then if you'll just leave a boat alone with nobody driving it, sometimes they make it. It's weird. Strange, strange things happen out on the ocean. And Jesus is in just one of those thunderstorms. The water is coming into the boats so much that the disciples say the boat is full. You've got to get up. He's asleep, by the way. They wake Jesus up and say, you've got to get up and save us. Don't you care that we perish? We're about to all drown, and you're asleep on a pillow in the bottom of the boat. Jesus gets up, looks at his disciples, says, oh, you of little faith, walks out to the edge of the boat and says, peace be still. And the thunderstorm just calms itself down. There's no more wind. There's no more waves. And his disciples look at each other in awe, which is what we should be doing. They had the proper response to the Lord's demonstration of his power. They looked at each other in awe and said, never a man spake like this man spake. Even the water and the waves obey him. Inanimate objects that don't have any life, they're assigning a life verb to them. They're saying the same thing that I would tell my children, obey me. My children are obedient. They do what I say. Sometimes, when they're in a good mood, and I'm in a good mood, and we're all in good fellowship, they have good respect for me, and I'm not talking to them too harshly, then things get done. They do what I ask them to do. They remember what I tell them to do. It's when we are out of fellowship and out of sync, I've noticed that disobedience starts to creep in. And you know, the Lord doesn't have that problem. The Lord doesn't have that problem with water. He doesn't have that problem with waves. He doesn't have that problem with wind or lightning or rain. He just talks to it and it obeys him. Peace be still. And to make matters even better, they're immediately on the other side of where they were going. They're immediately conveyed to wherever it was they were going. It's as if they time traveled. They slipped through some sort of supernatural wormhole and are on the other side of the sea just because Jesus said so. He commanded, he spake and it was done. He commanded and it stood fast. I recall another time where a man's friends, and this is a wonderful illustration about the power of prayer, I believe. Here's a man's friends who know he's a paraplegic. If you don't know what a paraplegic means, it means that you were born without the ability to walk. Your spinal cord hadn't formed correctly in your body. And everything's not correctly connected. You can't move your arms or your legs. And so you're truly at the mercy of other people. This man's friends understand that Jesus is in a house. They know that they're not going to get him. He's healing people. They've heard he can heal people. So they bring the man to the house and realize that there's too many people in the house and there's no way they're going to be able to carry this man into the house. Oh man, this guy had great friends, didn't he? I hope that I've got some friends like this. Everybody needs friends like this. They don't take no for an answer. They don't say, well, we missed our spot. We're late to the party. We should have got here at 6 in the morning, but Bill over here had to comb his hair. They don't say any of those things. They don't say, well, let's just go home or let's just see how the day works out. They climb up on the roof, put this man on the roof, hoist him up onto the roof, and then start tearing the roof apart and lower him down on ropes into the midst of where Jesus is. They simply just don't take an obstacle for an answer. They are determined that their friend is going to see Jesus before the sun goes down. And Jesus looks at the man and simply says this, without carrying you through all of the conversation, without carrying you through the lessons there. Jesus simply looks at a man who's been born paralyzed and says to him, take up your bed and walk. And the man gets up for the first time in his entire life, puts his bed on his shoulder, and walks out of the house. You recall there was some lepers who came to Jesus. By the way, the worst disease you could have. Always, I've felt very sorry for lepers ever since the time I've ever known there was such a thing. Because it's an awfully isolating disease. It's a lonely disease. At least back in Jesus' day. You understand, I've heard preachers, and so have you, but I'll just take you through it. Maybe somebody forgot or they weren't paying attention the first 100 times. But if you had lepers, or if you had leprosy in the Old Testament, there was a whole ceremonial cleansing that you had to go through. And then if that didn't work, then you were essentially banished from the nation of Israel for the rest of your days. You were not allowed to come within 100 yards of another person. You had to, I don't read this in the Bible anywhere, but I do read it in history books. People wore like cows. They wore bells on their clothes so that you could hear a leper coming. And if a leper was supposed to see somebody coming towards him, they were supposed to cry out, "Unclean, unclean." They were never allowed to go back into the temple. They were not allowed to go to the synagogue, nowhere near a synagogue. They weren't allowed to participate in any of the worship rites or ceremonies. They certainly weren't included in Passover. They weren't allowed to come to the Feast of the Tabernacles. They didn't get to do all of the things that made being an Israelite so special. Being God's chosen people came with a lot of social perks. It came with a lot of team building exercises. They were getting together all the time and interacting with each other all the time. If you look at the liturgical calendar of the Old Testament, there was something going on. There was some sort of feast going on all the time where people were supposed to gather, do some ritual. Don't you know that brings people together when we do things like that? We just experienced that yesterday. I hope you were involved in some sort of patriotic something yesterday. I know that I was. It brings us together as Americans. Those things are good for us to do together. In Israel, God understood that. God understood it and put it together, but not the lepers. Not the lepers. Can you imagine if we were to look at somebody and say, well, maybe this is not too far away from your imagination. You've got COVID-19, so you're not allowed to participate in any more 4th of July ceremonies, no more Christmases, no more Thanksgivings, no more birthdays, no more nothing for the rest of your life. You can live alone in a house by yourself. Don't come to us. We'll come to you. We'll leave the groceries on the porch. Don't ever come out of your house again. That's what it was like being a leper. And Jesus sees some lepers, and instead of being scared off, he actually touches one of them and says, "I will, be thou clean." And immediately the leprosy departs from the leper. The reason I point these three things out is because if there was a healer today, quote unquote, you know, there are healers out there, preachers that tell people that they can heal diseases by the power of God. They usually heal things like headaches. You know, somebody comes to church and they say, "I've got a headache," and the preacher puts his hand on their head and throws them backwards, and they say, "Oh, now I don't have a headache." Well, that's pretty suspect to me. Because why couldn't I just say I've got a headache when I don't really have a headache, and then come and get healed of the fake headache and say that the headache is gone? Why couldn't I do that? I could. But if there was a hurricane coming, and some man stood on the seashore and said to a hurricane, "Be gone with you," and the hurricane doesn't turn, it just disappears and it's no longer on the radar screen. Then he turns right around, he leaves there, and he goes to TMH Children's Hospital ward, and he goes room by room, healing children with cancer and that are paralyzed and are blind and are deaf, and doctors have looked at their parents and said, "We don't know what to do. We're at the end of our medical knowledge, and this is the best we can do. Your child's going to be paralyzed for the rest of their lives." Perhaps if he were to go down to the leukemia ward and heal all the people with leukemia, maybe that might get our attention. It'd get my attention. I'd start listening to whatever he's got to say, because he's speaking to things. He's speaking to things that can't be spoken to. He's working on things that are not supposed to be worked on. He's speaking and it's done. He's commanding and it's standing fast. And that gives me a lot of hope when I'm dealing with the Lord, to know that I'm worshiping a God who gets things done, who can get things done, who has gotten things done, who will continue to get things done. One of the things that bothers me the most about modern religion sometimes, and I hear it from preachers, is they say foolish things. Like God will help you think about it. God's not going to sometimes help you think about it. Maybe he will help you think about it. But he's got more power than just to help you think about it. God can heal you. God can change your circumstances. God can command things and they stand fast. God can speak to your problems and they disappear. Does he always? No. Did he speak to every storm in his lifetime? Absolutely not. Did he heal every leper that was in Israel at the time? No, he did not. Did he heal every paraplegic? No, we only have a record of it doing it several times. You know, Jesus only raised 3 people from the dead. I'm sure more people died while he was around than just 3 in the 3 years that he was here. But the point is, he's got the power to do it if he's willing. And we're told to ask him. And we're told to ask him believing, because he's put on a display of his power in the past, that he has the power to do it. He is doing it currently, and will continue to do it in the future. So we ought to stand in awe of him. We ought to stand in awe of a God who speaks and it's done, commands and it stands fast. The Lord bringeth the counsel of the heathen to naught. He maketh the devices of the people of none effect. The counsel of the Lord standeth forever, the thoughts of his heart to all generations. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, and the people whom he hath chosen for his own inheritance. I believe it's in maybe the 3rd Psalm. Could be the 1st. Well, let me just read it to you. Talking about the counsel of the heathen. I was wrong, it was in the 2nd. Why do the heathen rage and the people imagine a vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, Let us break their bands asunder and cast away their cords from us. He that sitteth in the heavens shall laugh. The Lord shall have them in derision. Then shall he speak to them in his wrath, and vex them in his sore displeasure. Yet have I set my king upon my holy hill of Zion. It was early in the Lord's ministry that the kings of this earth set themselves, and the rulers took counsel together how that they might destroy Jesus. As a matter of fact, it says from that very day, the day that the Lord questioned them and they couldn't answer his questions, they sought to kill him. And yet, the Lord doesn't deliver himself to be killed until he's good and ready. And the counsel of the Sanhedrin was, we'll scrub the earth of this man's name forever, and nobody will ever remember Jesus in a year from now. We'll just have him killed and buried and make sure that his disciples don't steal his body from the tomb. And after it's all said and done with, we'll just forget there ever was a Jesus. That was their counsel. I see some of you smirking and laughing. Because you know what the Bible is telling us is true, that the counsel of the heathen won't stand, and he's going to have them in derision and vex them in his sore displeasure. Don't you know that Satan was vexed on the 3rd day when Jesus Christ was resurrected from the dead? It was a little worrisome to Satan And it probably bothered him a little bit when he heard that Jesus Christ was risen from the dead. And it should bother him. The counsel of the Lord standeth forever. I like the counsel of the Lord. Counsel of the Lord means his testimony doesn't change. It doesn't go away. I don't know about your counsel, but whenever you give a decree in your household, is it permanent? Is it eternal? Does it stand forever? Is it as good? Is your word your bond? You ever changed your mind? So we're going to go to the store in 5 minutes. That's my counsel. And 15 minutes later, you're leaving for the store. Point is this: if the Lord said he's coming back, he's coming back. If the Lord said he's going to not lose any that his Father gave him, he won't lose any. If the Lord said that it was finished on Calvary's cross, then it was finished. The work of redemption is finished. If the Lord indeed said that he shall save his people from their sins, then indeed that's exactly what he did do, and that's exactly what you should believe that he did. The Lord's counsel standeth forever, and his thoughts of his heart to all generation. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. Now the second half of that verse, we don't have any power over that. And the people whom he hath chosen for his own inheritance. If we're talking about nations, then we obviously know he's talking about Israel. And we know that we're not Israel. We're not Jewish people. But the first half of that sentence is important. I've seen it quoted on bumper stickers and shirts and hats and signs. And it ought to be quoted. Yes, blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. I hear a lot of people complaining about the shape of America. And just for what it's worth, if you want to know how to get calmer about the shape of America, just whatever you're watching as far as 24-hour news goes, stop watching it. They're doing nothing for you except scaring you and worrying you. Yeah, we've got some problems to fix. But you want to know how to solve America's problems? It's not going to be who we elect as president. It certainly won't be who we elect in Congress. It's not going to be who's on the Supreme Court, although those are very important things, and I'm glad we have a say-so in those things. You know how America gets fixed? America gets fixed at the kitchen table. America gets fixed in your house, where Americans decide that they're going to turn themselves back to the Lord. It's not a matter of a nationwide trying to turn an entire battleship. It's just, are we going to turn our own rowboat around and start rowing the other direction towards the Lord Jesus Christ? If you do that, you'll turn the battleship around. I'm very convinced that the reason that this nation started on the footing that it started on is because individual households and individual people in individual homes were who they were at the time of the founding of this country. And who they were Bible-believing, church-going Christian people who wouldn't have tolerated any other government than the one that they were proposed with when the founders came back after July 4th, 1776. Yes, indeed. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. That just simply means favored, but it also means happy. You'll have a happier country. You'll have a happier country if individual Americans would stop being ashamed to pray over their food in public because it's more convenient not to. You'd have a happier people. You'd encourage more people if somebody would say, well, God bless you every once in a while, as a salutation instead of, I'll see you later. You know, I always know that I can trust somebody if somebody says, well, you're going to be there tomorrow, and I say, Lord willing, they say, you were right about that. All right, me and you got something in common. If they look at me like I've got 3 heads, then I'm watching you. Lord willing, what does the Lord have to do with it? Well, the Lord's got a lot to do with it, buddy. The Lord's got a lot to do with it. He's going to keep me alive tonight while I'm sleeping and unconscious. And if he doesn't, if I go home, then I won't be here tomorrow. So yeah, Lord willing, I'll see you tomorrow. There's a lot more to this song, but we're out of time. But truly, we have a lot to stand in awe of. We've got a lot to fear the Lord over. And truly, blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, and the people whom he hath chosen for his own inheritance. God bless you is my prayer. If there be one or more that would like to join with the church, come while we sing Amazing Grace. Stand while we sing. Amen.